Arturia just recently updated V Collection to V Collection version 8, and with that update we get a new version of Jupiter. So now we're on Jup-8 V version 4. So here at the top I have Jup-8 V version 3, and on the bottom I have Jup-8 V version 4. Now immediately you'll see a couple differences with the UI, one of them just being the color. This one's a lighter gray, this one's a darker gray. I definitely prefer the darker colors. But the next thing that you'll notice is that the layout is definitely different. Here before you had your banks and your presets. They no longer do that. I always thought that that was totally unnecessary to treat this like the original Jupiter where you did select your banks and presets with buttons. But there's no reason this should take up this much of your UI with what we're capable of, and that's exactly what Arturia changed here in the new version of the Jupiter. And because of that, they were able to extend out the arpeggiator. So now we have up, down, the order that you played it in, reverse, include, exclude, and before we only had up, down, and round robin. There are a few other slight UI changes, but nothing too big. The bigger differences between these two plugins is really the sound engine. So the modeling algorithm that they used in the V3 is totally different from V4. I noticed that they've updated some of their other plugins with the new modeling algorithm. I'll say that there was more of an advantage with the other plugins than with the Jupiter. I do hear improvement for sure, especially when you just go through the presets, but it's not as dramatic as, say, for example, the Stage 73. But let me go ahead and play the old Jupiter, and then I'll play some of the presets from the new Jupiter. Here's Astral Voices. Let's check out Muppet Mayhem. Belle and Sebastian. So I personally don't have any real complaints about the sound of the Arturia Jupiter version 3, but with version 4 they introduced the new modeling engine and a few other features that really change up the way that this plays, and I'll show you that here after we go through some of these presets. This first one loaded up is Different Ways. One thing I forgot to mention about the UI are these macro knobs. So these were originally available in Pigments 2, but now they've added them to all the plugins inside of the V Collection. So now we have instant access to the cutoff, the resonance, the amp envelope, and the modulations. So if I turn down this brightness, the cutoff will actually decrease as well. Resonance. Amp envelope, the timing. I can make it more of a pluck. Or more of a pad. And then movement will control any modulations that are linked to any of the settings here. So we'll literally hear movement in the sound. So from a straight pad, now we should get some movement in the volume. Huge advantage to the old plugins, just having those macro knobs. Let's go to the very next preset, Dark Flute. They categorize that as bells. That's really weird. You would categorize a flute as a bell, but let's go. try the solo lead, Unisync. Deep sci-fi strings. Go to Lo-Fi Keys, Memories. Here's a classic synth pad, 8-piece soundtrack. Darken that a little bit. So again, I do like the old sound of the original Jupiter that they had, but the update does sound better. But here's what's really going to set these apart from the original Jupiter. So if we go back into the UI, you'll see this new dispersion setting. If you go into this section right here, it's hidden until you highlight over it. You'll see voice dispersion, and that's what this is referring to. So if you have the custom option selected, you could go in and alter the pitch, the pulse width, the envelope, the cutoff, the resonance, and the modulations, and it will spread those out in the different voices. So I'm going to go back to this Unisync solo lead. You have 3 different settings and a custom setting. The first one's going to be the weakest of the 3, and as you go more to the right, the settings become more obvious. And basically what you'll hear is more inconsistency in the settings depending on how you have this voice dispersion set. So here's version 1. All sounds pretty consistent. I'm going to switch in between version 1 and 2 as I play. You could definitely hear the cutoff changing quite a bit. And the resonance. And then if we move to version 3 as I play, you'll definitely hear an even bigger difference. Versus 1. Sounds pretty consistent. 3. You get a lot more movement. And then you could go into custom and set this however you like. If I turn these up all the way, you could definitely hear that this gets pretty sloppy. hear that last note isn't even correct. So the one thing that I don't like about Arturia's Jupiter plugins is the voicing, specifically with portamento / legato. There is no legato. So if I go to solo mode, increase the portamento, there is no glide. And then if I turn portamento on, it glides no matter what. And that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for actual legato where I can glide into the next note, which is available inside of, say, for example, Pigments 2. And it's available inside of the actual Jupiter-8. So I'm really curious why over the past 10 years, they've never added a legato feature to this plugin. Not just this plugin, but they do that to all their plugins. So that's my biggest gripe with Arturia. Why not add legato just like you have in Pigments 2 to all of your plugins? And I'm going to mention that in every video, so get used to it for sure. If I go to Pigments 2, this is one of the most basic functions on any keyboard, on any synth, legato. So if I go into Pigments 2, go into the keyboard, you'll see I have glide time here. It says always glide. I could change that to off so that I actually get true legato. And it doesn't matter if I'm in poly 8, mono, legato, or whatever. If I overlap 2 notes, it's gonna glide if I increase this glide setting. That's what I want. And I could do that in legato mode. That's true legato, where you don't hear the second note repeat. If you're in poly mode, you'll hear that second note. So here's the first note. You heard the beginning of that second note. Legato gets rid of that and just blends them together. That option isn't even available in the vintage synths that Arturia makes, which is weird because it is there in the real versions of those synths. And mono does exactly the same thing as the poly, except you can only play 1 note at a time. What I love about poly and doing that, and then I don't have to glide if I don't want to. But for whatever reason, all of Arturia's plugins, their emulation plugins, they have always glide on. Basically just regular portamento. And I almost never use that. I only use that for chords, not for single notes. So that's my one big gripe about these plugins. Better keyboard control over how I play those voices. That being said, I have 2 other versions of the Jupiter-8 from 2 other plugin companies. So I'm going to combine, actually, I think I have 5. So I'm going to make a video where I combine all 5 of the Jupiter plugins and compare them, show you what the best features are of each plugin and why I would pick one over the other. So subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.